Now, I suppose you could refer to these as lesser known features or tips and tricks, but none of that just has the same punch as like hacks has to it. You know, when I'm watching an action movie, I don't want to hear that the bad guys have found lesser known features in the Pentagon or something. I want to hear that they've like hacked into... Man, Andrew, you really got to think about what could be taken out of context. Well, regardless, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andrew Perez, and here I'm going to be sharing with you 5 hacks to make your Power Apps design experience a little bit easier. Now, these hacks that I'm sharing with you today are obviously not the only tips and tricks available. Maybe you have some things that you do a little bit different or something that I don't cover here. If that is the case, feel free to go on down to the comments section below and share with us whatever extra things you may do for your Power Apps design experience. I'll be monitoring the comments section myself for the next couple weeks or so I want to make sure we have the most helpful information possible within this video. With that said, let's go ahead and jump into hack number 1. Now, what I've got here to test out on is a patient well check application. Now, the use of it isn't too terribly important. I just needed something that was going to have a wide set of controls and allow me to accomplish each of these things that I might need. So, with that said, hack number 1, using connectors instead of flows. I see it so often in people's applications where they'll be using Power Automate flows on pretty much every button for every individual action that could happen outside of the application. Now, there's nothing wrong with integrating Power Apps and Power Automate. In fact, they're meant to be integrated together. They are optimized for that. However, if you've got a very simple one-action flow that might be sending an email for you or creating an event somewhere, and you're using Power Automate to do it from your Power App, you're basically bringing a machine gun to a junior league archery range. You're really using something really big for a really small problem. You see, there's a much simpler way within Power Apps to be able to carry out these kinds of automated functions. Power Apps has access to the same connectors and the same actions that Power Automate does. So if you've got one action that you need to carry out, you can do that directly from inside of your application. Let's go ahead and do that for this one. Now, here I have this little mail icon, and typically I would create a Power Automate flow that would send an email, and I would hook it onto that button. However, instead of doing that, let's try using the out-of-the-box connectors that are available. So what you can do is come on over to the data panel. And in the data panel, this is where you have access to every connector that Power Apps has, not just necessarily data sources, but also data services. Every connector that is between Power Apps and Power Automate. So let me go ahead and use Outlook here. I'm going to click on Add Data. And Outlook's about the simplest one that I can come up with. Now, we've got Office 365 Outlook already available here. This is the same Office 365 Outlook connector that Power Automate has. Now, I already have a connection to Outlook in this environment, but if you happen not to, you might want to sign in to it, and then you'll have access to that connector. There we go. With Office 365 Outlook now in my data area, I can use Power Effects formulas to call upon those actions. Let's show that in practice. I'm going to select this little mail icon and then come on up to the onSelect property. And what I'm going to do is search for the name of the connector that I just made the connection to. So I'm going to type out Office 365 Outlook. Notice what comes up for me in the IntelliSense here. Now the IntelliSense is bringing up every single action that is available from Power Automate, including current and prior versions. Now, I would always recommend using the most current version of everything available, but let's say you were trying to hook into an older flow that you have made before an update was pushed out, and it's using a version 1 of an action, now it's a version 2, that can just as well be hooked into your Power Apps as well. So let me go ahead and find, it shouldn't be too hard to find, a send email action. Here we go. We'll do send email v2. If I click on it, you'll notice that to kick this off, you do have to open parentheses. And in my roadmap here, look what it's asking me for. To, subject, body. These are the same parameters that are available inside of Power Automate. You're just typing into them with Power Effects instead of using the Power Automate action that is regularly available. So inside the to field, I'll go ahead and write my email address, which I've got to go ahead and put in double quotes here because it is looking for a static value. Pragmaticworks.com. After I've done that, I can write out the subject. So I'll just say your email. Woohoo! All right. Now, thus far, I've only been using static values, but one of the big things in Power Automate is the use of dynamic content. Well, you can bring in dynamic content from your application just as well as you can in Power Automate. So let's say I wanted to tell them what record was selected here. Looks like this is my record for Miss Sloan Betts here. I'm going to go ahead and say in static text, you have selected, and then I'm going to use the concatenate function, so a little ampersand here, and reference that dynamic content. I'll do this item, and since it is a SharePoint list, it will have a title column, so I'm going to do this item.title. Now you can pull in any dynamic content that you want, right? And use it wherever in your messages that you want. After this, I'll go ahead and close this out. And then let me test out that button. If I press play here to preview my app, I'm going to click this mail icon for this one right here. So it should say my record for Sloan Betts or something along those lines. After a couple seconds of waiting, here I now have the email available. You have selected well check for Sloan Betts by Andrew Perez. So I know it's using my dynamic content as well. That is how I can automate a function such as that, a one action sort of flow without having to use Power Automate as my intermediary. That is hack number 1. All right, now hack number 2. Let's say I am working with a particular data source within a Canvas app, and I want to see what bits of data I might have available to me, right? So if I am formatting a gallery or setting up a form, I may want to know, hey, what can the user fill out? What have prior users already filled out? What data is available? What I could do is I could always go to the actual data source itself. So if it were a SQL server, I could go to SQL, a SharePoint list, I can go straight to the site. But let's say I either don't have access to that, maybe I'm working from a separate computer that's just not allowing me to sign in, or I'm just lazy, which is always my excuse for everything, and I want to see the data source immediately. Here is how you can see a data source from within your Canvas App Design Studio. It's a very, very simple process. What I'm going to do is go ahead and select one of these galleries here. Each of them is patched into one of my data sources. And maybe I want to add some extra info onto this gallery, but I just don't know what info is available to me. What I can do is come on up to the items property and search for whatever the data source is that I have within the items property. Now, if you've done some sorting or filtering like I have here, it may be a little bit of a search, but if you've got anything highlighted in green like this, that's probably your data source. What you can do is click on it to set your cursor active inside of that area. By doing so, by setting your cursor active in your data source, you'll see this little gray bar show up down here telling you what it is. If you click this drop down, I can now see a preview of the whole data source. I can see every single column. I can see a lot of the records. So if there were something in particular I were looking for and I wanted to know how the column was named, or I just wanted to know what information was in what area, I can access that from here. Now, there are varying levels of success to this given the data type. So let me just show on this table, I can do the same exact thing. There's varying levels of success given on the data type. For example, you may notice this author field is showing record. If the data type is a column, in the column is a full record, let's say it's a lookup column or a person picker column of any kind, then it might just show you record and you'll have to patch into that table to see the preview. At that point, you may just want to go ahead and go to the data source. But if you just need something quick, let's say I want to know what information, is there like an age or gender field or something along those lines, I can look through here and see, oh, there's a field for each of these things. So now I've got a better idea of what I can and cannot display to my user. So if you want to see the data source very, very quickly, this is hack number 2. Now for hack number 3, or again, lesser known feature number 3. This is something that's pretty hidden within Power Apps, but it is very useful and it may become integral to what you are building. There is a certain feature inside of Power Apps known as components and component libraries. What components allow you to accomplish is to create your own custom controls and utilize them within your application. Component libraries let you bring those controls across applications. Now, this sounds like a very useful feature, but it is pretty hidden. So if you look over in your navigation pane, unless you have messed with component libraries before, most likely you're not going to be able to see the option here. And if you click More, it's probably not going to show up under More by default. To find your component libraries, it's going to be under Discover All. You'll have to see everything that Power Apps is capable of. You may have to scroll down a bit, but over to the right, you'll see under App Enhancements, Component Libraries. Now, if you are planning on using this very often, I would go ahead and pin that feature. If I click into my component libraries, here I can create sort of collections of controls that I might want to make. Now, I've already created a component library in here, so you can select new component library from up here, but since I already have this one, I'll go ahead and jump into it so that you can see what I have built out here. Here we go. Now I have a very, very simple set of components here, but basically what I am doing is I am using other controls, combining them together, and creating something that I can now reuse. So here I have a header component that I have built out. When I work inside of an application, I typically create a header with a container, with a text label or many text labels, and with an image or many images depending on how I want it to look. That header sort of could be used as its own control there. Since I am reusing it over and over and over again, it's better to create something like that within a component library. So here I have a CMP header here, what I've named this one, and I have a menu component with a little menu icon available here as well. Now, I will not be able to go into necessarily the building of components with the time that we have here, but if you are interested in how you can build your own components and build your own custom controls, we do have on our on-demand learning site, it does come with our premium subscription, but we do have a course on specifically building components inside of Canvas apps. So if you want to see some best practices and how to build those, then you can access that there. Now, what I am going to show you is how I can bring those components into an application. So if there's something that I've built out, what you can do is within the Insert panel, you'll see an area where you can get more components. This will link into your component libraries. So here I have a component library that I've gone ahead and built out. I'm going to select that header component and import that in. And then what I can do is in my insert ribbon or in this insert area, there is now an area set aside for library components that wasn't there before. Within this library components area are any components that I've gone ahead and brought into this application. So let me go ahead and just click on it, even though it is probably going to look a little bit ugly. There we go. This is the component that I have. Now, it's not colored or anything, but it did take that component from my component library and bring it in. You can also define certain properties that are allowed to be changed for this component. So you can make these components dynamic as well. So I'll say goodbye is the header label here. There we go. Now my text here has changed. So that is how you can use reusable custom controls with those component libraries and bring them between all of your applications. So if you've got a header and footer that you are very attached to and you have to remake every single time you make a new app, This might be an easier way about that. Now for hack number 4, storing formulas. Let's say there is a power effects formula that you find you are using constantly over and over throughout your application. The biggest thing that I can probably point to is color formulas. Even though Power Apps does have themes now and custom themes that you can create to reference certain colors, I still find myself preferring being able to define individually which colors I want to use, so I find myself reusing color formulas very often. So what we're going to do is go over how you can sort of store formulas in a much easier way for you to be able to access them. So instead of writing out the entire formula script that you might need, you can just type out a nice and easy shortcut within Power Effects to be able to reference that specific formula. To do so, we're going to go in our tree view over to our app control and into a property called formulas. All right. Formulas allows you to store different lines of Power Effects functions, sort of as, how would I say it? Sort of like how variables might work, where you're giving it a very nice and easy name to reference. So I've got here some colors stored. Now, to access these colors normally, I would have to write out these RGBA codes. So I've got here RGBA 232, 244, 220, and 1 for this light green color that I want to store. I don't know anybody who wants to write out that number, those numbers the entire way through, right? So thankfully, with this formulas property, I don't have to. Now, this is not limited to colors. If you have several forms and you find you're using the reset form function over and over and over again, you can store the reset form function as a formula here. Pretty much any Power Effects function that you can think of can be stored here. Now, this is limited to formulas. It doesn't necessarily create data values of any kind. It doesn't work like a variable necessarily would. Variables do have their own uses. But if you don't want to write out the long Power Effects code, let me just go ahead and show and practice what this does. Let me select this container here and see if I can recolor it. So I have this container selected. I'm going to go to the fill color property. And here I've got an RGBA code, a blank RGBA code for me to fill in. Instead of using that, I'm going to go ahead and type in one of my con colors here. It's coming up now in my IntelliSense. So I'll do that con light green that I was messing with earlier. And with that, I now have this showing the RGBA code that I stored as the word con light green. So this allows me to, again, reference these formulas in an easier format. It also allows me to make changes that affect across my entire app. So to give you an example, let's say I was given a new theme or set of colors to work with by my company, and I need to change it for each individual thing that I have colored incorrectly. If that is the case, let's say I have been typing out the RGBA codes for every single thing that I want to color within this app. Well, guess what I'll have to do? I'll have to go to each RGBA code and make my changes individually. However, if I use that formulas property and there's something that needs to change generally across the application, I can simply go back to that formulas property and change whatever I have set to that shortcut. So maybe I'll change it so that it's 22,244, just to show what I mean. Once I change that, all right, that is making my eyes bleed. Maybe I'll change that back. But once I change that, everything that I have set to that formula control, everything that I have set to that specific formula that I have stored, changes all at the same time. So let's say you go through a rebranding phase. That takes a 40-minute job of chasing down every single color value or other things that you have set, and it turns it into 20 or 30 seconds of changing these individual formulas. All right, this is another little best practice from me. The last little hack that I have to share with you is setting app level security. So in Power Apps, Dataverse comes with a ton of security features with so much granularity. There's so much that you can decide per environment, per the data source. You have a lot of control over your security. However, let's say there are certain security features that you want only applying to specific applications. Maybe it only needs to be on this small scale level that you need your application to set up these security protocols. If that is the case, there are a lot of simple ways with PowerFX formulas to ensure that security features are set. And the number one way you're going to do this is by utilizing the user function. You see, whenever someone logs into a Power App, Power Apps collects the information from that user's Microsoft account. All right. So to sort of show this off, what I'm going to do, my security feature that I want on this app, I have it set here where I can edit any individual record that appears inside of this checkup area. Maybe I want it so that only the people who are logged in, all right, can edit their own records. If you're not logged in as that user, you should not be able to edit the records of somebody else or delete them for that matter. Let me use this edit pencil as my example, and we can apply the same logic to that delete function as well. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make it so that this edit pencil is only clickable if the user is the person that made this record. To do that, I'm going to go to the property known as display mode. You could set this on the visible property as well. There's a lot of granularity once you learn how to combine these two functions. But we're going to use a combination of conditional logic with that user function. Right now, my display mode is set to edit, so anybody can click on this button at any time. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that and instead set up some conditional logic. Now, to set up conditional logic inside of Power Apps, we always start with the if function and then open parentheses. So if, and then let's say it's collecting the assessor in each field. So I'll have it look at this item dot, and then look for the assessor. Now the assessor is a record, and good thing for me in SharePoint, it also collects Microsoft account information for these kinds of user fields. So I'll go ahead and say dot, and let's say the email. We'll do this by email. So if this item dot assessor dot email is equal to, here's where we'll use the user function. User, which is going to look at whoever's logged in, open close parentheses, dot email. If those two are equal, then I need this to show up in display mode dot edit. I want it to be editable. If they are not equal for my else function, I'm going to go ahead and put in display mode dot disabled. And then close my parentheses here. There we go. Now, notice what's happened for me. Let me go ahead and enter my application here. Notice what's happened for me. These other records, all right, from other people that are not me, that edit button is no longer clickable for me. I cannot select it. However, if I go to my record that has my name on it, even though it's just my name, in the data source, it's collecting my email. So that might be a little bit more direct if that's something that you want. I'm going to go ahead and click on that edit pencil, and it allows me to edit that record just fine. I could apply the same thing to this delete button, but that sort of combination of conditional logic and the user function is what's going to allow you to implement app-level security, basic app-level security. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, those are 5 hacks to make your Power Apps design experience a little bit easier. Hopefully everybody got at least something here that you might be able to take home with you and make your app design experience a little bit better. And again, if there is something that you might know that maybe I didn't cover here, feel free to share it down in the comment section below so that everybody might be able to take that home and utilize it. Now, if you want to go a little bit more in depth into Power Apps, maybe you want to be able to build out a full application and gain some of this knowledge along the way, we have 3 separate courses on our on-demand learning site. The link will be down below. 3 free courses that you can access that give you this kind of material and more. That is our App in a Day course and 2 App in a Snap courses where we build out full applications. Some of these things are within there, as well as some extra stuff on building out. Now, again, to mention as well, for our premium users, there is also a full course on building components and component libraries if you want to go more in depth on creating those kinds of custom controls. But with that said, I have been Andrew Perez. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.